Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another recording of Hearthstone. Today is Wednesday, August 21st. Now, we are starting late. The clock is blurred with my new feature. It's about 6 Central in the United States, and but I'm actually a little happy on that because it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be, frankly. I've certainly, due to insomnia, just stayed up way too late and shifted my sleep schedule to the point where I'm waking up around 4, 5, 6 in the evening, which is not the right times. I'm noticing I'm having some problems immediately. What is the problems? Is it bandwidth? Like, not stop something from happening? Yeah, dropped frames network. Okay, let me see if I can address that. As for last stream, as I'm trying to address this somewhat, yeah, I didn't stop these videos from playing, and that should save me some bandwidth, hopefully. Is there any other thing that I could do? It's getting to yellow from red, orange, red. Let's see. Well, what else would be using up bandwidth right now? Let's see. Yeah, I'm not as upset right now though that I'm going late, because in the end, me going late has worked out not as bad as I want to. This might also just be an admittance that right now I'm kind of happy to announce that I am back to playing video games, although playing Torchlight 1 is a little bit of a weird twist for me, considering how that game cannot be played with a controller. Like, there's nothing, there's no controller profile in this, in the PC version. And that doesn't really make any sense at all, because I remember 10 years ago playing the controller profile. Oh, you know what this is? I just realized why I don't have any bandwidth. I bet I'm still uploading videos from last night. I didn't check that. See, yeah, uploading one last video, cancel that upload, and yeah, it immediately goes green. There we go. So that's fixed. Last stream I ran out of space on my hard drive, so I'm probably gonna have to download last stream and upload it again. So that'll be like a lower quality video, but whatever. Either that or I just skipped that episode anyways, which would kind of suck because that is the Gamescom interview, not interview, but the Gamescom announcements, which we have a little bit more of that. Alright, yeah. As soon as I stopped uploading, which my upload is my limiting factor by far on my internet connection, I have probably not as much download as I would like, but plenty. But the upload is ridiculously low. If I could, even if I could just double it, I would be happy. So yeah, I'm playing Torchlight. I'm 2 hours into Torchlight. Torchlight really is a clicker game when you can't play it with a controller, though. And Diablo, I guess, would in a lot of ways be the exact same thing. So I'm kind of glad Torchlight is more of an accelerated experience and only about 14 hours or so. so that I can just get through the main story and be done with it on easy. Whereas if I was to even try to play Diablo on easy, it still probably would be more than 14 hours. I think you're going to get a 20-25 hour experience in Diablo, just because there's more levels, there's more enemies, a lot more grind. But there is something to be said about how it's kind of a random dungeon generator like Diablo. It's a Diablo-esque game where you can't use WASD to move. You have to use the mouse. As far as I can tell, there's no keys on the keyboard. So this is supposedly Torchlight's a mouse and keyboard game, but you can't use anything to move other than the mouse. So it's a mouse game with some keyboard extra buttons. We need to play the Tavern Brawl before we do anything else, so let's hop into that and start playing now that we've built a bit of buffer. The Great Amalgamation, what horror science wrought, build a deck and all minions count as elementals, mechs, demons, murlocs, dragons, beasts, pirates, and totems. Alright, so they're all amalgamations. So shaman cards? Let's see. Shaman and Murloc. Alright, I want the quest that says play this. Okay. And then what I want is a bunch of mechs. So, mech here. Maybe not so much that. And I don't actually want just mechs, I want magnet abilities. So magnetic, and then at that point, what other synergies could we have? We want some Murlocs that are beefers, so definitely this, something that would buff up the amount of the other characters you have. Some of that. I have 9 more spaces. Non-Murloc minions, that wouldn't really work. If you control a Murloc, discover a Murloc. Maybe there's something to that. But let's think. This will give you more Murlocs every time you play a Murloc. That's good. And let's see. I think for the last 7 things, we'll just need some spells. Not go heavy into overload things, but I think there's probably some spells here that would work just fine. Let's see. There's some Murlocs to be reborn. Take that totem while we're at it. Probably gonna lose one of those totems because everything else is. Let's get rid of the overload cards actually and take 2 of the lightning strikes instead. Then the other thing I want is bloodlust. If we can get that in there. 2 bloodlust would be nice instead of 2 lightning strikes. There we go. So that's a while. It has been a while since I've bothered to spend any effort whatsoever to build a deck for Tavern Brawl. And frankly, It's been a very long time since the Tavern Brawl has been even slightly interesting enough. You can kind of tell I'm in a better mood now. Now I'm not going to get too much into the geeks talk and servers talk. It's working, it's running. I have a slight concern right now. I have bad IPs, people who should not be allowed to connect to your computers. I have them blocked on the router level, and I had forgotten I had done that. So as I'm going back and rebuilding the server using the same configuration I used 7 years ago, I was blocking them on the server level, on the individual computer level, and that has now opened this weird situation where either the router is doing such a perfect job that it's not letting any IPs through whatsoever, which would be great. That would be excellent. But mostly I had just thought of the router blocking as something that was an element of blocking ads more than anything else. So either the router's working perfectly or the server level blocking is not configured right. So what I'm going to have to do is use my cell phone not connected to my Wi-Fi to get a different outside IP address. Find out what that IP address is. There's websites like that will help with that, certainly. And then use that IP address as a one to block. So specifically type in that .IP address and say block this on the server level and only the server level. So this the right way to do this, the right procedure would be to connect to the server using that outside IP address first, then block it, and then try to connect to it again and see if the blocking actually works. I've also set up the server to email me when it has internal Linux mail. Like, Linux itself has this internal mail system that when there's a problem or just when their daily logs happen, it mails the root user at the very least and sends them messages internally. And so I've set that up to forward that to an external Gmail account, and by setting that up I recognized, oh, there's actually several commands that I've been using that I mistyped and aren't actually doing anything at all. Look at that. I spent more time setting up that Tavern Brawl than I did playing the Tavern Brawl. Yeah, that was silly, to say the least. It's good news. On Tuesday, I logged in, and this changed, by the way. So, 4 weeks from yesterday, since today's Wednesday, the Tombs of Terror will unlock, which is good because you can see, while I do have 700 gold right now to purchase the first week of what will probably be a multi-week single-player expansion, I definitely should be closer to 3,500 gold by 4 weeks from now. It's going to be kind of a struggle to even be that high. I guess we're just playing Shaman cards now. This Murloc Shaman in ranked as well. I was playing off screen to get the 100 Murlocs done, and I got my 5th ranked victory to get the card back. Frankly, I need to make sure I have all the number of victories in each account to get the card back, although at this point I really don't care. Ben Broad's company, Second Dinner, had a small tweet message that they retweeted talking about how it is to interview for Second Dinner, and they said that it starts with a short 30-minute phone interview, and Okay, yeah, that doesn't sound wrong as far as interviews go. So, like, there's nothing shocking there. I doubt the interview process is going to be too weird for any video game company compared to interviewing with any other job. The thing that will be weird inherently is if it was overly coddling applicants or overly courting applicants and being really nice to them and really trying to get them to work for your company. In California, you can expect a little bit of that, but there is a certain line, I think, where it smells of desperation. Let's go play the coin here. So, yeah. I don't know how many employees Second Dinner needs or should get. You could certainly dilute your talent pool quite a bit if you just started hiring people like crazy. It is a long-term, slow poison pill to hire too many people that are untalented, particularly if they turn out to be raving like SJWs who are pushing the entire culture of the company into being something that it really shouldn't be. But that is often the first step to a company losing its identity. Mergers happen, massive hirings happen. You kind of don't want that as a business. You want to go slow and steady, and make sure everybody's as much a good fit and behind the boss's vision as much as possible. Yeah. When you think about McDonald's being a franchise company, if you ignore the franchise part about it, McDonald's has thousands and thousands of employees. Well, I guess Walmart's even a better example there, because Walmart's not a franchise company as far as I know. So Walmart has thousands and thousands of employees, but almost all of those employees are just there to get a small paycheck, and that's it. They don't know who the corporate leadership is. If you ask me off the top of my head, I'd say it's Sam Walton, but Sam Walton has been dead for a long time, so it's got to be one of his kids. So, yeah. But yeah, Walmart employees don't care about a Walmart culture. They don't care if Walmart delivers a good product or not. It is a prime example of a company that just has way too many employees if it was trying to do anything artistic at all. The good news is Walmart's not trying to do anything artistic, it's just trying to sell cheap products, and so all the theme that Walmart is interested in is great value and maybe a little bit of service with a smile, and they just have their employees wear a lot of t-shirts that on the back of their shirts say great value, and they put signs up that say great value all the time. And they have an in-house brand called Great Value. Moving on, we have a decent amount of news, and at this rate it feels like we might actually finish all the daily quests for the Americas account at least pretty quickly. So we should just get through all the news and not go extremely late, since it is now 7:12 Central Time. So let's start covering the games. We have a game here called Perdition, which I don't even know what the word perdition really means. I know there's a movie called Road to Perdition, but it's such an old phrase, I don't know. This is a student project, I can tell, because it's being published by Digipin the Redmond, Washington-based video game programming college. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure you would want to work at DigiPen. You might be slightly better positioned to go to DigiPen now, because I believe a lot of the Double Fine new hires may have come out of DigiPen. I think Double Fine is also in Redmond, Washington, and since Microsoft now owns Double Fine, it would be a guess, and this is a guess, that 4 years from now Microsoft would still own Double Fine and Double Fine would still be hiring people. So as far as student projects go, though, this is a free game. Most of the student projects are, but it has a third-party end-user license agreement, which I really don't like that. It's English only. It's single player. It's not being sold as a student project at all, though. Like, it's being sold as just a game by a developer called Contraband. Well, I'm gonna put it on the wish list because I know it's a student project, but it's being weirdly offered as this free finalized product, which frankly you'd be better off if you didn't do that. If I'm gonna be all completely honest, if I didn't know this was a student project, I would call this a slightly low effort asset flip first person shooter game. There's not a lot here that doesn't look like a lot of other asset flip first person shooters, although this trailer does seem to be rather fast paced, and maybe it plays really well. If it plays really well, that would make a lot of sense for a video game programmer to play something that to make something that plays very well but doesn't actually look that well. Back to our next game. We had a win streak there. Next game we have on Steam is called Poppy's Nightmares. This is being published by the developer DigiPen and developed by the DigiPen, which the previous game wasn't. A 2D side-scrolling shoot-'em-up where a little girl fights her nightmares. You can see this has a different art style, and it's actually a rather nice art style considering, again, this is a student project. This is actually trying to do something. It's actually going in its own visual aesthetic. I see influences of other art styles and art sources, but I'm not seeing anything that just feels like it's a complete and total clone. It feels like this also is heavily inspired by Cuphead, except for being a side-scrolling shooter instead, which I'm not really a big fan of side-scrolling shooters, but here we need to roll with this. But I could definitely see this doing something different. Now inherently, there's tons of Toho style anime side-scrolling shooters, and I wouldn't play those. So this, even by this scale, I'm being generous because of it being free and because of it being a student project. And side-scrolling shooters, third-party UI again, and not being sold as a student project again. Side shooters in general, whether shooters scrolling up or shooting to the side, have the inherent problem of having a lot of flashy things on the screen, a lot of distracting things. It's kind of hard in this, even in this dark red background, to see that this is probably the character you're playing as. This is probably a special shot you just shot, and then you have an enemy here, enemy here, enemy here, life bar here, and then more detail in the background than you probably really need. So you definitely run into issues. See, next we have a game, almost certainly from DigiPen, called Jer. I bet we have 2 more games at least from DigiPen to talk about, because I bet they put out just
the light protects
this year's graduating class, although that doesn't really even make a lot of sense either, because if you were to run the time frame, school for at least high school and elementary schools just started, so that one would assume that colleges are somewhat in that same pattern. Maybe colleges start a week later or a week earlier. So these games coming out right now is an indication that there's probably some professor in charge of listing these things, or some kind of budgetary issue where you couldn't spend any money until the new semester started, and that's these games that probably were finished at the end of last semester and DigiPen are now getting released right now. Whether that means that they take the summer off, I don't know if DigiPen has summer semesters or not. I kind of assume that they do. When I was looking at it, they had no dorms or anything like that, so you were potentially in a position where you would have to rent a apartment with maybe 2 or maybe 3 other students going to DigiPen, or at least one other student, and you're living out of this apartment, particularly if you don't live in Redmond, Washington in the first place to go to the college. So if there's nothing to do in the summer and you're renting an apartment, that would be a huge inconvenience on top of a huge inconvenience already. So yeah, that would be weird to say the least if they didn't have summer semesters, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's kind of, when I was looking at it, it seemed like it was a kind of small school. Next game we have from DigiPen is called Jira, which looks like it's a kind of Super Meat Boy platformer where you do a lot of jumping and have some abilities to crawl through areas. You can see this is all about transporting yourself and not really fighting enemies. It feels like it's probably inspired by Celeste more than anything. Jira, I believe Jira is like a support desk software or something. There's something in the IT world called Jira. Maybe it's not spelled that way. Maybe the word Jira means something that I don't recognize.
Shall we make a storm?
There is a bear. There are some enemies, but they seem to be not a lot. So yeah, this looks like almost a game you could just sell and play. It's free. Again, student project. I'm gonna cover all student projects if I can. Although I probably do need to decide when that's gonna happen. And here at the very end of the video, there's this final boss. Yeah, I need to decide when the back to school idea should happen, or not. So yeah, screenshots here are just of the video we just saw, which ideally you'd want to see screenshots show something different, but yeah, nothing here. It would be an interesting assignment, certainly, as to a student, to say, we want you to make we want you to make an advertisement for this game that you didn't work on. That way you know what it's like to be in the production field edge of that. Let's see. So then we kill that. That makes that 0. And then
Thunderstruck.
you hit that. And that does that. Yeah. Well, if the new incoming students, the freshmen, had to make the advertisements for the outgoing students, that would be interesting. Although I don't know how well that would work. It would almost certainly need to be a collaboration between the new students and the freshman students. And again, I kind of feel like Digipin in particular is so small that there'd only be maybe a handful of freshmen and a handful of seniors in total. Alright. How do we want to do this? Guess we can do that. That, and that. And we can win next turn. Next we have a game on Steam called Down Means Up, and this is not a Digipin game. And in comparison, it looks like it's a Gravity style frustration platforming game with no real textures at all, just shapes. It looks like garbage. Looks like an extremely low effort game, and instead of being free as the student projects are, this wants $2.54 discounted, and it's English only. So you can definitely see a scale there where things are different. Let's see. If I had done 6 more damage, that wouldn't have won. So yeah, Down Means Up is not going on to the follow list. I was able to finish my backup and format my old SSD hard drive, so now videos are recording to a roughly 512 gigabyte SSD all by themselves. I also decompressed my main hard drive, so theoretically in games that are limited by disk access time only, load times would speed up a little bit. I wouldn't expect the difference between a compressed SSD, particularly a 950 Evo, which is what I think I have. It's a 9 something Evo, maybe an Evo Pro. I don't imagine that there would be more than a 20% speed up in load times, and probably on average less than that. I think a lot of the older games just have baked in load times, and they just take forever. That is something I've seen with Torchlight. I'm not super deep into Torchlight, but I'm already running into issues where you're having to in particular not have I'm running into issues. What am I trying to say? Where a modern game would have the main marketplace, the main city, always loaded in RAM, so there would be no loading there, instead of what is at least a 30-second load. And then every floor, which right now I'm only up to like floor 5, so the floors are pretty small. Every floor is another load for really no reason. There's plenty of RAM in my hard drive, in my computer, where you could have in RAM the entire layout of the small city in Torchlight 1, and in RAM the level that you're on, and in RAM the level that you would be above and below that, and it would not be a problem in any way whatsoever. Alright, so 13 more shaman cards. So that's yet another reason why I'm hoping to jump to Torchlight 2. But then you're also in this weird position where Torchlight 1 and 2 were made by this company that has been shut down, Runic Games, and Perfect World, which I believe is a Chinese company, is announced Torchlight Frontiers, or I think is the name of the game, which is a MMO that's in development. I don't want to play Torchlight as an MMO. I don't want to play any MMOs. I don't think most people want to play MMOs. And if I was going to play something that looked like Torchlight that was an MMO, I'd almost certainly play just World of Warcraft, because Torchlight looks a lot like World of Warcraft, although it is also more of a Diablo-esque game, but I think trying not to have so many demonic influences, because let's face it, the Diablo storyline is a little rough, and just a little bit, I would say, but it's not something you would want to give to a 6 or 7 year old and say, here, play Diablo 1. Although probably wouldn't be a big problem if they were playing it. Whereas you could consider it a little bit, maybe more, giving a 6 or 7 year old Torchlight, particularly if Torchlight was on the Switch and had a portable grindiness to it. But yeah, its attempts to be a slightly kid-friendly, or the way it feels like it's a slightly more kid-friendly, grindy, point-and-click Diablo-esque game doesn't make a lot of sense, and making it an MMO doesn't make a lot of sense, because particularly in China, they don't want kids playing MMOs. They don't want kids doing anything that's going to take a considerably long amount of time. They want to limit the amount of time, and there is, I think, some legitimate arguments and actual science behind limiting screen time in general, not just video game screen time, but all screen time in young kids and kids in general. So, yeah, I would not want to encourage a kid to play something that goes on forever. Although, perhaps in today's day and age, it's better to get somebody hooked on playing something like Pokemon that would go on forever and has no microtransactions in it, versus having somebody play something that has a ton of grind in it and a ton of microtransactions to get around that grind, or a ton of skins to buy via microtransactions. But that's picking the better of two bad options. Let's see.
Gotcha!
Job's done.
Darn it. So, yeah, I don't know what you can really do with the Torchlight series. The Torchlight came out in 2009, so it's a 10-year-old series. Perfect World probably should have done some more things with it. I could even see it now. It looks like something that you would play on an iPad by modern standards. The graphics do. So I could see it getting re-released. I could see trying to put out more levels and DLC. It's not like there's a considerable amount of story there, so you're not even really in a position where you would want to do a lot to get rid of that kind of element. Right, so we do this, and then do this. And is this explosive trap? Yes, it is. And then do that.
Job's done.
In the turn. But yeah, you would have kept on pushing it, and this is the same thing I would say for Diablo 2, is Diablo 2, the sequel to Diablo 1, took way too long to come out, but for its time frame, that was a lot more acceptable. And then Diablo 3 took way too long to come out as a sequel to Diablo 2, and at that point it was no longer acceptable. And Activision Blizzard, since they own Diablo, has failed to release a Diablo 4. They failed to continue to add enough that would interest or intrigue new players to go and play Diablo 3. They tried to integrate a marketplace into Diablo 3. I think eventually, after many attempts, that failed. The marketplace in Diablo 3 is kind of the first example of Activision Blizzard going in the wrong direction and becoming greedy, where frankly just a new character or new sprites, new enemies, that's kind of all you needed. You could have put out several bits of expansions. I'm fairly certain some of the Activision Blizzard games in the old days had a considerable amount of expansions that came out, and you would, like, I'm pretty sure StarCraft had at least 2 expansions and Warcraft had at least 2 expansions. I don't know if Diablo 3 ever actually got any expansions because I had already lost so much interest in it. So, yeah, there's other clicker games, and that's the real revelation to me, is Torchlight, Diablo, they're really just clicker games and dungeon crawler games. And so when you start looking at other clicker games and other dungeon crawler games that have come to more popularity, particularly on mobile phones, Diablo-esque games have failed to really innovate or maintain any relevancy. They have their niche fandom. There will always be people willing to speedrun or play Diablo 1 and 2. I am totally willing to play Diablo 1 and 2. I'm not so sure I'm willing to play Diablo 3. And as far as Diablo-esque games on Steam, I'm fairly certain I don't want to play too many more after Torchlight 2. Like, I'm willing to play Torchlight 1, Torchlight 2, and then move on. Speaking of moving on, I should cover the news more. Gamasutra has an article, Get a Job, Guerrilla Games, that has a senior producer listing for Amsterdam, the Netherlands. So, if you're interested in that job, that's available. In a no-duh story from Gamasutra, a report has come out that rumors have come out, I guess this is the way to say this. Microsoft used human contractors to listen in on Xbox recorded audio. No duh, like every single software, which I assume this would be Xbox One with the Kinect features for Skype, for Cortana probably more than Skype. Alexa does the same thing, and all the other Google.
Shall we make a storm?
Okay, Google does the same thing. I'm just gonna say all the key words to irritate people. Good news for people there is it probably won't work anyways. They very rarely listen to me. Yeah. Somewhere in that third-party end-user license agreement, for technical reasons, people may have been listening to an incredibly small percentage of the audio. And I wouldn't be surprised, particularly in the Microsoft level, that if people were listening to it, it might be because they're moderating the voice chat and listening to say if you're saying something like incredibly offensive. or at least that Microsoft considers incredibly offensive. You have a level of security to obscurity. Very few people are saying something that is incredibly incriminating to the level that incriminating evidence would actually ever make it into the hands of a prosecutor in front or on their Microsoft Xbox. We've heard exactly 0 stories of this actually involving anyone getting embarrassed or anyone being really negatively affected at all. That is the trade-off for having a camera and a microphone in any device. If you want to be paranoid about it, and I fully understand your reasoning behind that, you desolder every microphone and every camera you have, and you live that lifestyle, and you don't let those things in your house at all. Or you just realize, hey, this is just a convenience feature, and I'm willing to trade the potential loss of my privacy to some or underpaid contractor in India, more than likely that barely speaks English in the first place. So, you know, yeah, that's the world we live in, and you pretty much assume that that's the case for everything. I did see a project called, I believe, Snips, SNIPS, that you run on a Raspberry Pi for voice commands, and it's local voice commands, whereas some of the other Raspberry Pi projects and Maker projects definitely integrate into the Alexa or the OK API and send the audio to a web server. So if you wanted to get really paranoid with it and have some voice commands, Snips might be the software for you. I wouldn't be surprised if there's 2 or 3 other softwares of similar ilk out there. But yeah, take that for what it is. The bigger argument to me personally is really, are these voice activated devices actually that useful? It falls, I think, heavily off a cliff if you're not listening to music at all. If you never ever listen to music, it makes very little sense to have something that is effectively a speaker set up in your house. If you are not doing a lot of random Google searches to ask questions or ask for recipes or what the weather is, some of those things, then it falls off, I think, another cliff. Inherently, the frustration with voice recognition in previous generations has been so high, and the voice recognition has been so inaccurate that there's no reason to integrate it into any kind of software, like particularly in programming. It would be amazing if you could talk to a computer and it could understand what you're saying in programming language and put that into your source code. But that doesn't work. Even short commands like saying search and replace search, short little text editor commands are much more accurate. In the past they've been, at least, by just using a mouse and a pull down menu. So until voice recognition becomes 100% accurate, which it isn't there to that point yet, it's not a very useful system for most people. It might be a good system for little kids, But then you're kind of making a toy product, and it needs to be specialized towards little kids at that point. Which I'm fine with that if that's the direction that the products want to go. But even now, when I do on rare occasions try to use voice products like Google, they're not consistently accurate. They're not consistently right. And on a day-to-day basis, you're not doing complex functions, or you couldn't think of the complex functions that you're doing. There is no command that would easily work where you could say just balance my checkbook and it would balance your checkbook. That's an old reference, I guess, nowadays, since most people probably don't keep a checkbook. Or pay my bills. That would be a harder function to do. Moving on, we have a story from Gematsu. Gears Tactics adds an Xbox One version. It's in development at a company called Splash Damage. Was Gears Tactics? It was announced for Windows 10 PC at E3 2018. It will also come to Xbox One. It's an XCOM game in the Gears of War universe. Seems like they're definitely trying to have a two-tier assault here as far as Microsoft products. They want clearly for you to either become a huge fan of Gears of War as a franchise, or they want you to become a huge fan of the Halo franchise, or both. Ideally, I guess they want you to be a fan of both. But they are certainly going to be cross advertising each other. So Microsoft needs to be really careful about the time that they release Gears of War 5 versus Halo. That being said, I believe somebody in the upper management of 543 Industries, which is, I believe, the company making Halo Infinite, was fired effectively. He left the company and didn't do it in a very vocal way, so they tried to sneak him out of power and got caught, it seems. And we haven't seen any actual gameplay of Halo, so that's an issue too. So Halo might be a couple years off, whereas Gears 5 probably is coming out in the next 6 months. So their two-tier approach might work out very well for them. Alright, next turn I just play both of these because they're in cards. Of course I draw a bomb immediately and I can't play these two cards. Did we play enough Shaman cards? Yeah, we did. So we are done for this account. And we're moving fast, so I don't think we're even to the point where we would want to break up the recording, so let's just play again. Again, having a harder and harder time finding times to break up recordings. While this is loading, Gamer Search has an article. Government regulation means Steam China will be a curated platform.
Today's a good day to do some exploring.
Which, no duh, with their censorship thing. It might be the fact that they're going to have a Steam China, or might eventually mean we stop seeing so many terrible Chinese games coming out on the Steam for the rest of the world, but I wouldn't be surprised, frankly, if it changes very little. The truth of the matter is, as more and more things come to light in the news about China, and particularly the president of China trying to become emperor of China and implementing a total crackdown, it seems. There's a lot more to complain about than their video game censorship rules, and nothing to tell me or show me that there's going to be any change anytime soon as far as their censorship rules. I think there's a much bigger issues that are going to have to be addressed. And as far as the video game world, maybe some low-effort Chinese developers will stop putting their games on Steam worldwide, but I suspect they won't, because I imagine most of the low-effort Chinese developers don't have approval via the Chinese censorship boards anyways. So in the end, we'll probably just see more terrible low-effort Chinese games, unless Valve was going to do something crazy. I guess we need to play Priest and Warlock cards. Valve, I suppose, could do something really, really crazy and say no games that are Chinese only on the regular worldwide Steam platform, but I don't see a reason to do that. This is probably another example in which Valve and Steam should not do business with China at all. I think until things change politically in China, all companies should boycott them. So instead of the President Trump talking about tariffs, he really would get a lot more play if he could articulate, we're not implementing tariffs, we're implementing straight up bans because of the bad behavior. If it were a country like Saudi Arabia or Iraq in the past, we have done full-on embargoes against companies because of their countries, because of their leaders being dictatorish and fascist. So the fact that China is big and a big economic power base has allowed them to be a member of the economic community that they should not be allowed to be a member of, in my opinion, until they change their ways for real. And we could get more into that, and we could talk about Twitter banning thousands of troll state-run Twitter accounts putting out propaganda. We could get into more of that, but it's not really video game related. So I'm trying to mostly just limit this conversation to video game related. I think we're gonna have to just disenfranchise the people of China until the leadership of China starts treating its people and the rest of the world a lot better. Just keep on playing cards. That's pretty much all I'm trying to do. Yep. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article for the PS4 game Project Sakura Wars. They have details for the London combat review characters, Tokyo Game Show 2019 plans, and more. So we're getting more bits of information about the next Sakura Wars game. Which, for as much coverage as it's gotten, it looks like it is going to be kind of a major deal, at least in Japan. That being said, I'm still not 100% sure that it even is coming to the West, let alone it being a game series that has any real popularity in the West. I've certainly heard of Sakura Wars. I know there was an old anime in like the 90s based on that, but I don't know if that works its way down. And then this is one of those presentation Japanese videos where it's talking to a screen and showing clips. Alright, let's see. 411 imps. And then that. And that. And then underturn. Gamma Sutra has an article here. DayZ has had its ban lifted in Australia following modifications. The game was banned because it was including cannabis as a beneficial consumable item, which I would argue, even as a person who has absolutely no problem with cannabis, I don't see how you really make a good argument that it has a beneficial element to it. That just seems kind of silly. Alright.
Sure, send the little guy.
How do we want to do this? Here. And then here. And then here. And then here. And then I think we're good there. Yeah, I don't. If you were to maybe have a game that managed your stress and ingesting cannabis some way eventually lowered your stress, maybe I could get that idea, but I think even then you would have to pay for it by being so mellowed out that you couldn't actually do anything tactical or violent, which is the main thing you're doing in video games, or you would have to
Time's up. Let's do this.
Yeah, you'd have to deal with being so mellowed out that you couldn't actually do anything, or so tired, or you'd have to change the way the screen looked, make it a little bit more wavy and crazy, which I imagine doesn't really even happen when you're heavily intoxicated with just cannabis, but you'd have to have something there for it to even make a little bit of sense. And in a real world comparison, while I would be fine with a military medic having a cannabis CBT THC style of medicine to use for actually wounded or injured or just hurting in pain soldiers, I almost certainly would guess in the real world that would be a long-term treatment of something, not something that you would do instantaneously. We've already got plenty of options in games for instantaneous heals, health potions, just bandages in general. There's you're really just pushing the edge, pushing the limits by having a THC inspired recovery item. The same is true for cigarettes too. Is like it made a little bit of sense in BioShock where smoking the cigarettes gave you Eve, but even then that was kind of ridiculous. And if they had made the decision late into development and it came out to remove the cigarettes from BioShock, and instead have it be something else, I would have been fine with that. And honestly, I think they did remove the cigarettes from BioShock eventually. I'm not sure BioShock Infinite really did have cigarettes. Instead it was bits of candy or something, I think. Yeah, and I can see just an association issue there. You just kind of don't want your game associated with potentially encouraging people to start smoking cigarettes or smoking or using cannabis. The one message I think that is best put out to anybody who is young and impressionable and that someday might try cannabis-based products once it's legal is that as these products are getting more and more legalized, at least in the United States and probably even in Australia eventually, there is time to test and try those products without potentially hurting yourself. Give your demons +1 attack and deal 1 damage to those guys, and then draw another card, and then attack here, I guess.
As you command.
Sure, send the little guy. Hey, catch!
In the turn. Moving on, Gamma Sutra has the same article. Steam is heading to China as a separate marketplace. Perfect World is the Chinese developer and publisher that's working with them. So how can Perfect World be working on a Torchlight MMO when they're working with Valve to make Steam China? Perfect World being the second biggest video game company in China, I believe. And again, probably unfairly gained a lot of market share due to government support and manipulation of the market's economy. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 Gamescom 2019 gameplay trailer. So you can see here is a dialogue choice. I don't know how much of this I really want to see. I think Vampire the Masquerade in particular is definitely trying to sell itself on sex. I think one of their trailers already had a either nearly naked vampire or a naked vampire. There's a lot of characters. Now, my question really is going to come down to how big the world is and how much story there really is, because when you get into like face scanned characters, you're probably going to end up talking to them quite a bit. And I guess I wouldn't be upset if Vampire the Masquerade became this game that was just a storyline based thing. Here apparently you can see the vampires versus the humans based on their blood and such. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, draw, in the turn. Yeah, it's got a weapon wheel here. You can see they're talking to this guy. It has a kind of Dishonored feel, frankly, and maybe even a little bit of BioShock feel with that attack and the crowbar. So if Vampire the Masquerade 2 Bloodlines 2, it's way too long of a name. It needs to be like VTM or something. If it is more of a single player story experience, I'd be kind of fine with that, because I haven't played any of the previous Vampire the Masquerade games, I guess Bloodline 1s is really the only one that matters to play. Bloodlines 2 is due out for the PS4, Xbox One, and PC in Q1 of 2020. My slight fear, though, is that it is going to be an overhyped product and actually a 5 to 7 hour experience. Like, what I'd really like to hear, and I don't push for this idea very often, but for Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, it'd be nice if a big third-party publisher came in and contracted with them. That would be an ideal situation. I guess I'm gonna have to play Priest now, which surprises nobody, frankly. Should I play Ranked? I kind of feel like I need to, because I'm not even sure I have 5 ranked victories yet. But yeah, if there was more funding there and the game was delayed a little bit and they said we're going to make it 3 times as large, that would be great. Because personally, I'd find it just a little bit disappointing if we got into that situation and then there was very little going on in the game. And we've certainly seen several games like that where they look rather nice and then they're super short. At least 2 I can think off the top of my head. There was the Cthulhu-esque one that came out a couple months ago, and then there was the occultish one that was episodically released, where like George Washington and a bunch of famous people were in a secret society. I don't even remember what that was. A couple of years ago there was something that was kind of a Dishonored style game that was super short also, and it was super overly hyped. I can't really remember the name of it though. And there's definitely been consistent issues of games being like that, being overhyped and then turning out to be really slow. There was a zombie game, a vampire game where you played as a doctor that was small, that sold itself a lot on the graphics also. So again and again and again that seems to happen.
Right away.
Let's see. I think to start with. Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article. Apple has delayed its new rules for kid-focused apps to give devs more room to comply. So eventually I guess Apple is going to force people to have more kid-friendly, kid-focused apps, but they kind of backed off on it and didn't enforce the rules. Eventually, though, that you just can't go any further with that. You can give people a little bit of extra time, but then you really shouldn't have drawn a line in the sand in the first place. This really is a example of them either not being willing to enforce the rules or stupidly setting a deadline when they were going to begin enforcement without being willing to stick to that deadline. I guess No Man's Sky is done. According to Gematsu, No Man's Sky Beyond has a PS4 physical edition launching September 10th in North America. Beyond being, I think, the kind of the latest version with all the updates. I thought that was kind of comedic that you would have No Man's Sky coming out at this point in a physical edition. Of course, nobody should care about No Man's Sky or want to play it nearly 2 years later. Next, Gamatsu's article, Hyperformia for the Switch launches September 5th, which I don't know what kind of game this is. It looks like it might be a shooter, up-screen shooter, or it's been a while since we've seen a Switch exclusive indie style of game. So, is this something like it that this kind of looks? Yeah, it is a shooter in a 3D environment. So kind of like an Asteroids clone, but with more of a boss rush element. That looks interesting. The question is why? Why is it a Switch exclusive? Maybe Hyperformia has come out for other things. That might be the case.
I just want some peace and quiet!
Job done.
Yeah, let me do a little bit of research here and see if Hyperformia, it's in the Apple App Store. It's for the iPhone, so maybe it's a cell phone game. Yeah, it's not on Steam. If it was on Steam, I would see it on the first page almost certainly. So it must be a just more simplistic experience than it really seems like it is.
Your rage sustains me.
So let's assume that this is Explosive Trap, and as such, attack here. Nope, not Explosive Trap. So as such, attack here.
Job's done.
And then the turn. We had the teaser announcement of Moe-Ro Crystal H. Now we have the announcement. Moe-Ro Crystal Hyper has been announced for the Switch. This is an anime lewd dungeon crawler by the looks of it. So it'll come out at least in the Japanese eShop. I'm not sure if it will come to the West. Apparently an English version of the original game was never released. So Crystal Hyper might be a remaster of the original game with English, but I'm not actually seeing that. So we're kind of getting back on track after Gamescom is what I'm getting from this. It seems like Japanese developers in particular kind of respect the power of E3 and the power of Gamescom. I heard Gamescom actually is bigger than E3 and has more attendance, and is probably too big for its own good. So yeah, I probably shouldn't have a American-centric perspective and assume that E3 is the biggest video game event. Just assume that, but I kind of feel like it kind of is because it's the first, and that really is the only reason, is that it is the first big event of the year, of this quarter at least, and it gets the most coverage and the most announcements. You don't have Microsoft and well, until recently Sony, and a while ago there was also Nintendo, all making big announcements at Gamescom and new releases and trailers at Gamescom. You get a little bit of that, but not usually from the big players in the video game world. Moving on, Gamatsu has, for the PS4 and Switch, The romance visual novel DC4 Decapo 4 is coming out on December 19th in Japan. So yeah, we're getting more visual novels, at least the Japanese are. So they seem to be back on track. This is weird. I thought this game came out already. Power Rangers, Komatsu article. Power Rangers Battle for the Grid for PC launches September 24th. I would have sworn this game had already come out. Last I heard, this game wasn't really great, even though they did try to address some of the issues and put some story in it, because originally it was released with like no story at all. Even if you were a major fan of all the Power Rangers series ever, I still don't know if this really is the game for you. I don't think it's much of a fighting game for anybody, frankly. You're probably better off just enjoying Power Rangers, if you can enjoy Power Rangers in its TV format, and then playing other fighting games if you enjoy fighting games, and not try and mix everything together. Next we have a Komatsu article. Demo Reborn launches November 21st in the West. Day and date with the Japanese release. Demo, if I was to guess, is Demo Reborn is a remake, I guess, of a JRPG, if I was to guess. But let's look at the trailer and see if I'm right. It might be a music game, actually. There was this weird music game from about a year ago, or a game that had this feel of it being a music game. Yeah, they say it's a rhythm game according to the tags. Yeah, it's a rhythm game. I'm not really sure I would want to play a rhythm game, although the non-rhythm parts of this game does have kind of like a Pan's Labyrinth style visual aesthetic to it, which is interesting, to say the least. But I don't know if that sells me enough on the game. Let's hit that and heal that. And then we can silence that next time, so we don't need to. There's 60 songs inside of Demo Reborn. Even ignoring the fact that I have no rhythm, though, it's hard to be a YouTuber and try and play a rhythm game for fear of everything getting content ID'd. Moving on, Komatsu has an article. Luigi's Mansion 3 Gamescom 2019 presentation included co-op antics and a new floor of the hotel. I would not be opposed at all to playing Luigi's Mansion 3. You are in this weird position where I'd like to play Luigi's Mansion 1 again, and that's not something that I could do on YouTube. And playing 2, I think 2 came out on I'm fairly certain Luigi's Mansion 2 came out on like the DS, so that would also be hard to accomplish and cover. So you are in this weird experience. Notice that you're getting Nintendo announcements at Gamescom instead of like in Nintendo Treehouse or Direct. Next article, Komatsu has the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening presentation, which this is the remake of Link's Awakening. So, some video here of them showing off the improved graphics on an old Game Boy game or Game Boy Color game or whatever. Right, so this, and then this, this, and then this. I'm just going to do all that right now.
Job done.
Behold!
Next, we have a Gamatsu article for the PS4, PC, and Switch. The Alliance Alive HD Remaster trailer. A lot of this is just trailer stuff. Had I spent more time on this, I would have cleared out a lot of these trailer things. Alliance Alive looks like a JRPG. It doesn't particularly grab my attention. It has the chibi art style, where characters are particularly small and a little bit low polygon on top of that. So yeah, as a unrecognizable name for a JRPG and a uninteresting visuals for a JRPG, it's not probably in the top 10 list of JRPG games that I'd want to play.
Your magic shall not save us. Cry more!
Gamma Sutra has an article here. GameStop has laid off 120 plus people amid a almost consistent amount of rounds of layoffs at GameStop as it's going out of business. Let's face it, it's just going to go out of business. And they've laid off some Game Informer people. So this is video game journalists, mainstream video game journalists, boo-hooing because other mainstream video game journalists got laid off. They really didn't care if other people get laid off, but the one minority that news in general cares about is journalism. Journalists. That's who they care about more than anything else. Okay. Let's see. There was a list floating around as far as the names of some of the Game Informer staff who's been laid off, but it's not in the Gamma Sutra article. Honestly, I don't know why anybody would knowingly follow Game Informer, knowing that they more than any other mainstream video game journalist site were bought and sold, designed to be advertisers to video games. When GameStop owns you, there's no way you're going to be able to 100% maintain that journalistic integrity. It's just not going to happen. I could probably say that maybe on a rare occasion I've seen a Game Informer YouTube video, and then since so many of the journalist sites do start with the name game, maybe I wouldn't immediately have remembered that Game Informer is owned by GameStop. But I would say at least 80% of the time, anytime I've ever seen anything with Game Informer, I've seen, oh yeah, this is just a hype article. This is just to push the sales of more games at GameStop. And on a bigger note, we need less cronyism in mainstream video game journalism. So to have that ever happen, we need to potentially start to see some of the existing journalists leave the industry. And frankly, that would be good for several reasons. But just
Right away.
specifically, we need to see people leave the industry. And they would not really be missed. The only people I've ever seen leave video games and kind of missed them were Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb from G4, which that was probably 10 years ago, and that's kind of it at that point. And so if Adam Sessler and Morgan Webb came back and were going to have their own little YouTube G4 video series, which is what they should have done after they were canceled, that would have been interesting. But they'd been doing it so long at that point anyways that it makes very little sense to try and have that experience.
My father's blood.
Right away.
I knew it.
Alright, how do we want to do this? Whenever you cast a spell, this does something, so let's just get that off the field. And let's do that. And let's do that. And I could silence that, but I wouldn't really want to. So I'll just silence these guys again. But I could give you a long list of people who should leave the video game journalist world because they're not interested in video games. They don't play video games really. Not enough to justify being employed in the industry. They're not adding to any kind of voice that follows an opinion line that is, I hate to say the word valid, but valid. You could certainly find that website that has all the like Gamergate journalists who accused everybody who wanted ethics in journalism of being sexist. You could at the very least stop following people who actively were sleeping with the game developer that started Gamergate, but you don't even have to go that far. Just go to a standard Kotaku, Eurogamer article, standard one of those websites, and just find the people who wrote the articles that are like video game violence, video games make people violent, video games make people sexist, everybody's a toxic gamer, blah 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 blah. Anybody who's writing those articles, those are the people that should be out of the video game industry because they wrote those articles, and any editor that maybe changed the title to make it be an article like that or force somebody to write an article like that should also definitely be out of the video game industry, the journalistic industry. Frankly, we could fire them all, but it's a dying industry anyway, so it should just be ignored, I suppose. And most places, like even Giant Bomb, are mostly taking themselves out of actually talking about video games as much as possible. And they're talking about other random stupid things, which is okay on rare occasion, but often it's the only thing they're talking about. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Traveling Around the World in a Hot Air Balloon. This looks like it's a VR game that's probably an asset flip game where you're just in a hot air balloon. That does fix some of the VR issue of not walking around and room scaling things. But yeah, this really is just an asset flip. $16.99, English full audio. It's probably 4 or 5 locations that are not super interesting to look at. So that was one victory, and it didn't increase a counter towards my ranked victories. So I'm gonna assume I've already done 5 ranked victories on whatever account I'm on. Am I on the America's account or Europe Asian account? Because I started. No, I'm on the European account because I started on the America's account. Yeah. My Great Suspender plugin, I uninstalled it and reinstalled it, so hopefully it will finally fix this little bug. The bug wasn't a big deal. It was just bringing the Chrome browser window to the front of the focus, so it was just kind of popping it up, which was annoying. So hopefully that would be fixed and I'll never see that bug again, but knowing computer programming, I wouldn't be surprised if the bug shows up again. Next we have a game called Aim God, which is just an aim trainer, low effort asset flip game. Why anybody would be dumb enough to buy a game that claims it would improve your shooting ability and aiming in some other game, I don't know. This is $5.99 English only with a third-party EULA. It's definitely not making it to the follow list. If you want your aiming to be good in Fortnite, you need to play Fortnite because Fortnite reacts differently than any other game does. So practicing on some third-party software is not the way to do it. I would half suspect that some of these aim trainers on Steam are actually aim bots in disguise, actual cheating tools, but one would hope that Valve would catch that if that was the case. That certainly would be the way I would try to sell a aimbot cheating software, is to create something called a trainer and then either link people to installing different software or include cheating software in it. I wouldn't even be surprised if somebody thought it a good idea to sell an aim trainer and then integrate a cheating software into the install, so you're cheating and you don't even recognize that you're cheating. It just feels like you're getting better at the game, like the aim trainer promised. Next we have a game on Steam called Screen VR, which looks to be just a random assortment of asset flips for a VR game. Early access $14.99, no discount. Full audio English. It looks like it's supposed to be some kind of first-person shooter, but I don't see any enemies, I don't see any gameplay, there's no video. This is not anywhere close to being a polished and ready to sell product.
Your rage sustains me.
End the turn there. Next we have a game on Steam called Warhead Destined, which looks like it's a little too close to an MS Paint level graphics. A lack of understanding of color palettes, incredibly large tile sets here. The camera is zoomed in way too far for what it's showing. The thumbnail here is incredibly deceptive compared to what you're looking at. This is early access, $11.99 English full audio.
I must consider.
I could get 12 and then, since I've got nothing better to do, I guess I'll do this. Next we have a game on Steam called Songs of Skydale. It feels like today would have been a great day to curate some of this more. This looks like an RPG game that probably wasn't made in RPG Maker. but that doesn't really mean much other than it's just looks slightly different, but not actually any better than an RPG Maker game. Discounted to $8.99, English only. Let's see. There's nothing to do, so we'll just leave it here. Next, we have a game on Steam called Marineverse Cup, which looks like it's a sailing simulator in VR. Now, I think sailing is kind of a particularly dangerous, wind sailing, racing is kind of a particularly dangerous sport because you have a high chance of getting hit in the head by the mast and knocked overboard, or just but I don't think it's much more dangerous than extreme rock climbing. I don't know if you really get that experience in VR though. There would be something said, I think, in particular about wanting to smell the sea air and feel the wind in your face, that you're just not going to have that experience in VR. Well, regardless, this game is early access, free to play VR, so the price is right, but it has a third-party account that is required, which I would not want to agree to that. It's English full audio, it says. Visually, the game is lacking a little bit. Yeah, more than I'd want it to be. If you were going to do a sailboat simulation, I would want to see that. I'd want to see the graphics look hyper realistic. And you probably could get some funding from boat companies to have like hyper 3D scanned, very high quality boats of different brands shown off in your game if you could make those deals happen. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Forbidden Punch, which is a game where you're literally just punching each other in the gonads and kicking each other in the gonads. Not something you really want to do at any point. You only have to hear one horrific story of someone's testicular sac splitting open and the massive amount of pain and damage that can happen due to it being a relatively thin layer of skin. That's like I know that particularly as girls are younger, think that if a guy is hassling them, that's the right move to go for. It might be the right move to go for, but it is also a dangerous thing to do. You would be better off macing the person because you'd potentially well, you can kill people with pepper spray too, but yeah, you're better off not doing any of them. Not doing anything violent. But yeah. As for the game, getting back on topic, Forbidden Punch is discounted to $1.19. It's English and Russian. It's a Russian troll game. Surprise, surprise. And the one thing that they haven't done here, I think that would at least be a little bit funny, is if they had some female characters in here. But
Right away.
yeah, there's none of that. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Climate Survival North Storm. This looks like this is a village management game. The problem I can see immediately is because it's going for that winter theme, everything, including the UI, is all white, so it's just white on white on white on white. Also, the UI here is taking up an incredible amount of space, which that's in Torchlight too. Also, Torchlight 1 also has a point where when you're leveling up, you're bringing up your RPG character sheet on one side that's taking up about this much of the screen, and then you have your skill sheet that's taking about this much of the screen. And when you have both of those opened, the camera zooms in and pauses the game because you're spending all of your focus there. But it's putting it on the side of the screen, which is not really where you would want it to be, frankly. And so you're having a really cramped, not effective menu experience, which has way too many menus, showing you way too many numbers. When Diablo did it way better. It really does feel like it's an example of Diablo just having done it better, and then Torchlight doing it differently for fear of getting sued. Or something like that. Back to Climate Survival North Storm, every screenshot is just white snow on white snow. Probably to hide that a lot of this is asset flip stuff. It's $4.99, no discount. English. Yeah, again, a game not making it to the followers. Well, he managed to finally kill him. Let's see. Next we have a game on Steam called Magi Strangers, or Magic's Strangers. It's supposed to be Magic and Strangers. It's a visual novel. It's not tagged to any adult content. The animation looks a little bit rough, so I feel like this is like a heavily pasteled, like oil painted images that feel Japanese inspired, but coming from, I think, a Western developer. I wouldn't say this is a Chinese game because there's too much text being shown, and frankly the backgrounds aren't detailed enough for a Chinese visual novel. Also, the backgrounds are a lot more rural than urban. This is free to play. It's English and Russian, so again, very possibly a Russian troll game, but even if it isn't, and it's just a Russian visual novel inspired by anime art aesthetics, it's not worth anything. Clearly, it's free to play. Right. Put that there. Put that there. Back here. Draw another card. And return. Next we have a game on Steam called Achievement Simulator, which is just a extremely low effort clicker with MS Paint graphics. You can see here $1.69 discounted, English, Russian, Chinese, 14 achievements, so it's not even really much of an achievement game. But this is also an indication of how much Valve has started limiting people from making achievement games, which is for the better. Now, arguably, I think everything with the word achievement in the name should get red flagged. Just a human should be looking at that and doing an evaluation and saying this game is not quality enough. Then the name's a low quality name, the graphics are a low quality name.
I just want some peace and quiet!
Let's see.
Your rage sustains me. Your rage sustains me.
Okay. So we need something. That won't kill me.
away.
In the turn. Moving on, Gamasutra has an article. Denuvo has launched a new mobile game security solution to help developers prevent tampering. Hopefully nobody adopts that, because the Denuvo name is a name tainted with performance problems, and the last thing you would need would be performance problems in your mobile game. And frankly, at least in the game I'm playing the most these days, Destiny Child, I'm sort of tampering with it because I'm putting an uncensored patch in it. If they started to disallow people to use the uncensored patch, I would not be happy, and potentially might even stop playing the game in total. They do reset the graphics every time there's an update, but I think that's at most incidental, or it's just an uninterested party in ensuring that the graphics stay uncensored. But then you just have to reload the patch, and it uncensors the small handful of graphics that are slightly censored for the global version. The fact that Denuvo is expanding might be an indicator that we are hitting a point where fewer and fewer AAA developers are using Denuvo in AAA games, so that they're moving over to mobile. If that were the case, I wouldn't be as upset about it, frankly. It would be kind of nice to see if Denuvo gave up on mainstream AAA games. There's a lot of noise coming from Hearthstone right now. A lot of noise. So I just got legendaries on everything.
Well played. You followed the wrong line. You followed the wrong line, man.
This dies at the end of the turn.
You face Jaraxxus, Eladar Lord of the Burning Legion.
What is this guy doing?
You face Jaraxxus, Eladar Lord of the Burning Legion.
Should I squelch this guy?
You face Jaraxxus, Eladar Lord of the Burning Legion.
Probably should just give up at this point.
You dare challenge the Lord of the Hunt? Dare challenge the Lord of the Hunt?
Should have enough to win here. He's doing the maximum amount of damage possible. Let's just take a step back and make sure that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah, I need to get one more priest or warlock victory. And then the other play the weapons daily quest, I think I'll probably re-roll for Friday. Because I could struggle for several hours trying to play weapons, but if 450, I should just re-roll it. As long as I get one daily quest done today, that'll be fine. Moving on, Gamasutra has an article. Ready Set Heroes is the first Sony published game to debut on the Epic Games Store. Ready Set Heroes must have been released a long time ago on the Sony platforms, because I don't recognize it. Or maybe it is a brand new game. But it's just had terrible amounts of coverage. It certainly would change the layout of the video game competitive world a little bit if we started to see that Sony was unwilling to put its games on the Steam storefront for some reason. I don't know why, because my understanding is Gabe Newell left Microsoft and hated Microsoft, so he would be more than happy, I think, to have Sony PlayStation games on the PC as exclusives. Perhaps he was not willing to do the exclusive route, and that was the thing that Sony was hung up on. Like, Sony could have a game, or anybody could have their game exclusively on Steam without
Right
getting
away.
paid extra by Valve to make it an exclusive on Steam. That would just be an advertisement decision and a publishing decision that the publisher would make alone. But most exclusives, and particularly Epic Store exclusives, involve the storefront paying extra for the privilege of it being an exclusive, and I
Right
doubt
away.
Valve would care enough to do that. But if in the future we start to see a bunch of Sony games coming out on the Epic Store, that might be one thing that would start to push the idea of the Epic Store having at least a little bit of a chance of succeeding. But it's probably too little too late, because there's so much bad press around the Epic Store already. Moving on, Gamasutra has a video here. Think you're ready to pitch a publisher? You're not, and here's why. This is from the GDC Vault. I wonder if I had more time, I'd probably watch this video. Almost certainly what you need to pitch to a publisher is numbers, details, more than just a lot of enthusiasm, which is and a potentially unique idea. You probably need to convince somebody to play it. Convince people to really fund your dream, and that your dream will be successful. Yeah. We have this, which I guess we can heal this. And then do I want to change this?
Rage sustains me.
I can't do that.
The name of the turn. TechRaptor has an article, Remnant from the Ashes review, a Solid Souls shooter. So like a Dark Souls game with shooting, which I don't know how you don't at a certain point get into, isn't that just Resident Evil on its hardest difficulty at a certain point if it's monsters that you're shooting. That being said, I guess a competitor to the Resident Evil series is more than welcome. And this game, Remnant, does look interesting visually. So if it plays well and it looks interesting and it actually is out on PC, they gave it a 7.5 good. Remnant from the Ashes boasts a beautifully realized world with awesome enemy design. I have no cards to play here. Awesome enemy design and top-notch gunplay. There's plenty of customization and incentive to go back for more. Unfortunately, the experience is ruined by repetitive boss battles and lacking social features. Pros: wonderful world design, fantastic gunplay, plenty of build customization. Cons: lackluster melee combat, predictable boss battles, and no social features. I don't know why they're saying no social features. I guess maybe it has some level of co-op but no like chat during the co-op. This is from Perfect World Entertainment, again in Gunfire Games. Perfect World publishing it.
I wonder.
And the videos don't want to load. Wish I could figure out how to make sure everything preloads on these pages. $39.99. Single player online co-op. Bunch of languages. Rated M for mature. It's rated very positively. I think this goes on the wish list. As long as I can play it single player, yeah. A gun-based Dark Souls, a modern Dark Souls, so you're not having to jump back to playing Dark Souls 1, 2, or 3 before you can get to something like Bloodborne. Skipping all of that, being more gun-based, more distance-based, is my style of gameplay in particular, so yeah. I see a lot of appeal there. There is an argument, I guess, to be made that it is just a 7.5, but I'm not that picky as far as games are, and I like the art aesthetic. It's not just trying to be a medieval sword and sorcery world with guns. Torchlight has guns too in it, and it's weird because you have a mage character class that has staffs when it first starts, but I guess it can use any of the weapons, any of the classes can. You have a melee class that has swords, and you have a archery class that has a bow and arrow to start with, and then there's just guns thrown in, and it feels like the guns in particular are the best weapons for anything because they go against armor, and I think pretty much all the enemies you run into eventually will be armored, or the guns will do so much damage anyways. So it's a weird addition without a real balancing element, and I don't know how you have an RPG with guns in it without then also maybe balancing the other elements quite a bit. You can't. Torchlight, it really feels like they just threw in guns for guns' sake. Which again, 10 years ago, I guess it was fine to have a Diablo-esque game with guns in it, but that doesn't really help. If you're going to have guns in particular in RPG, I think you go to the Borderlands element where everything's a gun, or you have a grenade lobber who's just always lobbing grenades, or you as a balance to guns, and then you have like a knife expert that's like throwing kunai knives all the time, or ninja stars all the time, to give everything a reasonable amount of damage and distance.
The light shall bring
But then
victory.
you lose the melee combat element. Yeah. Guns certainly complicate a traditional fantasy RPG game for no reason. Let's see, let's move on. We still have a ton of news, and it looks like tabs opened sort of out of order, so because I uninstalled and reinstalled my app, so I'm not 100% sure where we are as far as that. I should break up this recording, and frankly at the end of this game I'll break up the recording and we'll get 2 episodes out of this. I think that makes some sense. And at the end of this game also I think we'll move over to the Asian account, because I don't care to sit here anymore and try and get this last victory. I'll do that off screen. Moving on, TechRaptor has an article, Blair Witch might be the scariest game of the year. It might be, it might not be. They have a first impressions video that I think is unique to TechRaptor. So a bit of an exclusive.
Must consider.
It's gonna be hard, certainly, to do the whole Blair Witch game and not just play it and make it feel like a advertisement for the movie or movie series. And it's gonna get even more difficult the later you are to that party. So if this game comes out within a few months of a new Blair Witch movie, that's great. But if you're playing it 2 years after the last Blair Witch movie, that's going to be really weird. By the way, there is another there's another game that came out on Steam that is an advertisement for a movie or TV series, and it just came out. Hopefully I'll be able to show it off. Almost certainly it's one of the tabs that's open, and it just came out with no advertisement at all. Gamatsu has this article. I think we already talked about this. Demo Reborn launches November 21st in Japan. So this game is not even out. This is the rhythm game we were already talking about. Okay. So, you're gonna do this. You're gonna do this. You're gonna end the turn.
Say the magic word.
Part of the problem of trying to find controller support for Torchlight 1 is that I keep running into controller support schemes for Torchlight 2, which apparently even more people were upset about that than anything I played out of order there by quite a bit. Gamatsu has an article here. Final Fantasy VIII Remake, Gamescom off-screen gameplay. I believe this game is either very close to being out. March 3rd, 2020 is when it's coming out. That's not that close at all. But,
let's see.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII Remake. I might be confusing it out with Final Fantasy VIII Remake that maybe came out a while recently, last week. But yeah, Square Enix is still hanging its head high and hoping that I should just done that first. Yeah, there's definitely a level of hype and overhypeness for the Final Fantasy games at this point. And the games either need to come out or not. turn. Gamatsu has an article, Sega Ages Puzzles in Action. Ichidant R, first details and screenshots. So this looks like an old Japanese Sega game. I have no idea what this is though. It looks like it's a very simplistic RPG of some sort. Yeah, I seriously doubt this would ever come over to the list. Like, the name's not recognizable. It seems super simplistic. Alright.
Your magic shall not save you.
And this guy on the field. This. And this. And then in return. Gamatsu has Battletoads Gamescom 2019 gameplay. So, a video of Battletoads. I don't think I'd ever really want to play Battletoads. Like, I've never played it before, and as a beat 'em up brawler, I'd be kind of fine with playing it as a remake, particularly if they fix the crazy hover bike part that was totally impossible. But I'm not really sure I'd even really want to play that. By the way, Control is dangerously close to coming out. It's coming out like next week, I think. I'm guessing. But it's odd that hasn't gotten slightly more coverage. But yeah, it seems to be the way things go nowadays. Is games get overhyped until just about the point when they are about to come out, and then they stop getting their hypeness. The Epic Game Store, I believe, on Twitter here, had more trouble. Let's see, free games on the Epic Game Store. That's not it. That's not it. That's not it. 7 hours ago, if you continue to experience issues accessing the 2 Colonies DLC, please reach out to player support as we may investigate this. The 2 Colonies DLC is the Metro Exodus DLC. Remember, Metro Exodus was the first major game to have this is what I needed. It was the first major game to be an Epic Store exclusive. So now they're having trouble getting that DLC for their first game, their flagship release as the Epic Store to actually work. Which it probably is the first example of them actually handling DLC at all. Alright, so at the risk of the next episode barely being an hour long, let's end this episode here because it's been nearly 2 hours. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.
After a long day at work, it's nice to be among friends.
Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another recording of Hearthstone. Now today is Wednesday, August 21st. This is our second recording of today, so there's an odd chance that this will be a shorter experience, but we're on the Asian account. We have 250 things we have to do. Both involve winning a game. So Druid and Hunter, and then went to Priest. I've been playing Priest for a while here, so let's just hop into a Hunter experience. And I want to play ranked because I want to make sure I have 5 ranked wins before the end of the month. There is a new bundle, by the way, that's come out. It seems like Activision Blizzard is getting more and more desperate for money, so they're selling more and more cards, card bundles, which
versus Gul'dan.
yeah, I definitely wouldn't spend money on Hearthstone at this point. I'm already telling people that probably as soon as the new Marvel game comes out, I'm abandoning Hearthstone, which is probably going to happen a year from now or so. So we are wrapping up things as far as I'm concerned, not trying to invest into this 5-year-old game. We have a decent amount of news still, it seems. My tabs seem to be maybe a little bit out of order, but I think we can go at least an hour here between trying to get victories and covering the news. So let's start covering the news. Gamer Search has an article, get a job. Eno Games is hiring for a senior Unity developer. That's in Hamburg, Germany. I believe Unity also has released more educational support for teachers to learn Unity themselves, to teach to other students. So there's like a whole new group of educational syllabus style lesson plans that the teachers should start teaching themselves. Unity, I think, is a great language to be teaching kids. There's a very high chance that Unity in some version or form will still be available by the time a kid graduates. It is an industry standard. It's not the Epic Store Unreal Engine, which maybe that would go away, maybe it wouldn't. I doubt it would actually go away, though, by the time kids graduated. But yeah, there's really no better language, or Unity is kind of an overlay language for C#, I believe, if not G#, which is definitely not the languages I was taught. And you'll get further by far by having the Unity overlay software on top of programming core C# or G# programs. And you'll have a finished experience in something that looks like an actual modern game, whereas back in my day I had to hard code everything in C++ in DOS, so all I could draw was black squares and black rectangles, and so all I could program is something like Pong. And even doing that was incredibly difficult because there's no libraries, there's no support, and the teacher didn't have a clue what I was even trying to do. And I would have been a lot more motivated, certainly in my programming classes, had I been able to turn out anything that looked even close to it. I remember I was given a very thick, very large book about programming video games that came with a CD-ROM that had like images and things in there, but then it would have required me to read that giant book, and honestly that was just never gonna happen. So I didn't get anywhere,
I wonder what this does.
and didn't succeed in that project either. But that's where a lot of programming was when I was being taught programming, is these giant books that you were supposed to read, when personally I was typing and programming in computers because I hated reading books. So education through non-interactive media is not very helpful. Twitch support had something to mention, I suppose. Mods can now see content that was caught by the auto mod along with other messages a user has sent in chat by selecting Messages tab on a profile card. So that's nice. I don't think there actually has been any new shenanigans on Twitch for a while, since the last shenanigans, which still was way too unacceptable that they were promoting porn on Ninja's abandoned Twitch channel. But yeah, it would be much nicer, frankly, if Twitch was putting out a considerable amount of improvements in its service and getting streamers hyped to use its service instead of having to report terrible news about it. Same is true for the Epic Store. If the Epic Store had just good news to say, even if it's not true, or even if they're just conveniently ignoring all the bad news, it would look better, certainly, to the average person following them on Twitter. LibRetro retweeted the FreeDOS project. FreeDOS is a FreeDOS compatible operating system for IBM PC compatible systems. Let's see. They put out this tweet: I'm looking for developers and software publishers of DOS software from the 1980s and 90s. Now is a great time to re-release your DOS programs as open source software. It builds goodwill and creates positive attention. Contact me and let's talk. And he put his email here. Please share. Inherently, I think releasing old DOS games as open source might be a little hard because they might have used some other licensed software that might still be in effect. But also, I think the bigger issue is most people who made DOS software have either moved on in their lives and would never see this tweet, or are too busy to do anything like that. Or also they've lost the source code, so you can release your binary, I guess, as open source, but it's not really open source at that point. And if it becomes a long project, or even if it's a relatively automated process that decompiles and reverse engineers your source code for your DOS game, which you almost certainly could do. You could almost certainly reverse engineer and decompile a bin without all the comments, without all the original source files, and the parts that get ignored when a compiler compiles a program into an executable. Your code's not worth a lot there. Code in general from those times probably isn't worth a lot anyways. The one thing I could think is that it might be a situation where a few programmers did some really interesting low-level coding elements, but most developers probably did nothing worth mentioning. I have like everything I need except for a minion. Gamasutra has an article. There's a rumor/report. I'm gonna editorialize and say rumor that the Apple Arcade monthly subscription will cost $4.99. Okay. Nothing I saw as an exclusive at the Apple Arcade really caught my attention though, so that's that's not something that's I'm gonna ever really deal with.
Like to play with fire?
Job's done.
Let's see. Next, we have a game called Westworld Awakening. This is the game that is an advertisement. Now, this requires VR, and it's $29.99. I wouldn't be surprised if this was a PlayStation exclusive first. You're in a weird position here because it has the funding of Warner Brothers Interactive behind it as a publisher. This might be a good-looking, interesting VR experience, but it is also an advertisement for Westworld, the HBO series. So if you don't have HBO, you can see every single image here has HBO in it. One hopes that you're not getting watermarked with HBO content throughout the entirety of the game. I guess that's not being done in the video. Why they're watermarking the screenshots on here makes no sense. Again, these are advertisements, screenshots that can't be copyrighted. So why are you doing that, HBO? Nobody else does that. I guess I have to put this on the follow list. If you have a VR headset and you don't mind spending twice as much as you probably should on a VR game, this might be a high quality one to experience.
Quickly.
In a field where there really isn't a lot of high quality experiences. I can only really put it on the follow list though because it's a VR game, and as I've said many times before, I seriously doubt I'll ever buy a VR game. Okay, so I got a victory before, and I didn't see the counter go up as far as ranked victories, so I don't think I need ranked victories either. Yeah. So I can just play Priest and on casual here instead of ranked and save myself some frustration. Gematsu has an article here. Viz Media and Rose City Games have announced a pixel graphic adventure game called Garden Story for the PC. Viz Media, more known for publishing manga and anime than video games. But Viz Media has certainly tried to go in different realms.
Light shall bring victory.
Well, I think it was Viz that at one point was having people post their fan mangas on a website and then potentially stealing it and not paying people much of anything, if anything, to publish those ideas. Looking at this trailer, there could be a game here, or it could just be a generic RPG, Zelda clone. Even if it is a generic Zelda clone, if it's just a little bit in quality, that's not terrible. It's coming out in spring 2020, so there's a chance, to say the least. There is a chance that this would be a good game. Of course, it's kind of a hype article at this point, since it's not anywhere close to coming out. And I probably should get a lot better at getting back to basics and just saying, let's just talk about the games that actually are out and not talk about games that are potentially coming out 3 months, 6 months, a year from now. Speaking of games that actually are out, we have something called the Gadget Twins here that has a cutesy, cartoony art style to it, but looks like it is just a shooter game with weird attacks. This almost feels like a proof of concept student project of a game, and I would argue the proof of concept fails here. The idea of flying planes and then having little boxing gloves come out of the front of their planes to hit enemies really destroys the concept of a shooter. This is a Pico interactive game, so this might be a really old game, which would explain the graphics and the sidewalls too. $3.19 discounted, English, full audio. Like most Pico interactive games, unfortunately, it's not something that is a relevant enough old game to be interesting or to make you really want to cover it. Next we have a game on Steam called Brain Power Trainer. This is almost certainly a low effort quiz game. Yeah, that's exactly what it seems like, a low effort quiz game. $7.19 discounted, that's way too expensive. English, Polish, Russian, and Ukrainian. I think that very possibly means this is a low effort Russian troll game. They put a picture of themselves. Most people don't do that. Some would call that doxing your team for no reason on Steam. Assuming those are really the names, the people. Alright, next game is tag sexual content and nudity, but it seems like it's safe enough here. So maybe the clock is reset here because we have another game of sexual content and nudity. On the other hand, there's always been this long-running belief that the terrible sex games have been allowed on Steam to just try and flood the market with terrible games and drive people away. So you have Kill the Hentai here, which is just a copy-paste cardboard cutout of an anime girl in a low-effort asset flip first-person shooter. Early access, 59 cents discounted, English full audio, it says. Nothing here that you would really want to buy. Yeah, I cannot do anything. The problem that we're running into now, it feels like 3 weeks and we're moving into the 4-week mark. It's been a while where we've had just a standard visual novel from a kind of unknown publisher that has adult content. Yeah, it's just been a while since that has happened. Can I do anything? So I just should copy this. And that's pretty much all I can do. So what I would like to see is just a Japanese visual novel that's a mature rated, tagged sexual content and nudity. I've seen a couple of visual novels that have allegedly come out, but I've somehow overlooked them, that have uncensored patches if you go to their website. So that would be the old way of doing things. If Valve is really back to that, fine. They should just be honest and say that. We had the Senran Kagura Peach Beach Splash Ball, which that's such a big developer that I'm kind of overlooking that. And now we've seen a couple of terrible games that are in the category of adult games. Let's see. And double and attack. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Undermine, which looks like it's a dungeon crawler with I can't really even call this pixel graphics. I couldn't even really call this a 16-bit pixel graphics. It's a little bit pixely, but that's kind of it. It has a level of smoothness to it. I don't know this developer, I don't know this publisher, but this actually looks interesting to me. It's already very positive. Its early access is $13.49. English, German, and Portuguese Brazil. I'm putting this one on the follow list, then we'll keep an eye on it. If it comes out in early access, I think Undermine might be the next Spelunky style game.
Whispers everywhere.
They managed to kill my character somehow, as
My hand is
I
too
figured
full.
would happen. TechRaptor has the same article. Animal Crossing like a garden story is being published by Rose City Games and Viz Media. They're calling it an Animal Crossing game, where to me it looked more along the lines of a Zelda game, but I guess they would know better than I did. Yep. Here is the bundle, by the way, that's available from September through September 3rd. $20 in US for 20 packs and a legendary, random legendary.
That didn't go as.
I believe is. It's
There is little time.
probably not a terrible sale if you buy packs, but it's a terrible idea to buy packs for Hearthstone, like I said. TechRaptor has an article here. Grobo is an attractive puzzle platformer with great gravity mechanics. We've seen quite a few gravity mechanics games coming out lately. Let's see. This seems like this is more of a mobile game, and it's not out yet, so this is kind of a hype article. The one gravity game I'd really like to play would be Gravity Rush, and that was like a PlayStation exclusive, so I don't think Gravity
My
Rush
hand is too full.
would ever make it to PC, unfortunately. It'd be nice if it did. Maybe Gravity Rush 2 did make it to PC, but then you're in that weird position. Moving on, Gravity Rush, by the way, is a 3D gravity game in a 3D world, compared to most gravity games being a 2D world. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Starbreeze has posted a 6.6 million loss amid its ongoing restructuring. Starbreeze in the last 4 years or so went from we're going to be this giant publisher, we're going to make all these deals, to oh, we're totally out of money and we're basically approaching bankruptcy. So whoever was running Starbreeze really didn't know what they were doing. Gamma Sutra has the same article we talked about before. Denuvo is launching a new mobile game security solution to help developers prevent tampering. Honestly, I don't think there's an incredibly large amount of tampering that is happening. I guess there's probably a decent amount of stealing of paid games off Android, but I would bet the indie level of equivalency of what you would have for many other styles of storefronts and products. Okay.
Right away. Oh.
Alright. Now, how do I save myself from miserable death? You kill that first. That does 3 damage. And nothing else I do matters. I've lost.
My hand is too full.
Tech Raptor has an article here. One Punch Man, a hero nobody knows, manages to balance Saitama. Saitama being the main character of One Punch Man, who defeats everything in one punch and is disappointed by that. So here are the weird collection of heroes and villains that you fight or that you see in the One Punch TV series or the anime. So he's just standing there letting him punch, and then he hits one hit and KOs him. They're bringing in more characters from the anime, from the manga, which I think helps having a fighting game around One Punch Man. One Punch Man actually kind of makes a lot of sense as a fighting game spin-off. So yeah, I would be cool with playing that, I guess, but wouldn't be really my first pick. I would definitely rather play Dragon Ball FighterZ first, or even the Kill la Kill IF game. If you are going to get into One Punch Man, I would say watch the first season of the anime, and you're probably fine to then move into the manga, or just read the manga alone. The second season was done cheaply, from what I hear, and the animation suffered greatly because of that. And the game spin-off can only do so much to expand that kind of universe. Speaking of universes, Disney and Sony failed to reach a deal, so apparently Spider-Man, who was set up to be in the MCU, is again outside of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which this is which might affect in some ways the video game universe a little bit, but not much, because I'm fairly certain that the Spider-Man video game license is separate from the Spider-Man Marvel license. So the Spider-Man video games will still happen, and I don't think Sony Interactive Entertainment would have bought the developer of the most recent Spider-Man game if they weren't in a good position to make another Spider-Man game. But who knows, I guess Sony Interactive Entertainment could have not done the due diligence on the contracts. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Mystic Mayhem Unleashed, which looks like it's an MS Paint platforming game that, again, a lack of understanding in color here. In particular, you can't even tell the foreground platform versus the background platform easily. It's just terrible looking and way too much red in the screen. Discounted to $4.49, English only, full audio. So yeah, sorry I paused there. So of course that's not making it to the follow list. Next we have a game on Steam called Stones of Solace, which this might be a kind of small, low effort game, puzzle game, I guess, or there might be something here. Seems like you're just dragging and dropping things. A minimalistic and contemplative ritual offering you a quiet space for relaxation. Yeah, this feels like it's one of those meditation apps that you see advertised a lot on YouTube. It's like, use this meditation app. This is free to play with no in-app purchases in English, so I guess it's priced right. But yeah, it's incredibly small. It's incredibly small Zen flower arrangement app. And I have really no interest in that at all.
Let the pain speak to me.
Yeah, people are getting into what they're calling transcendental meditation, or just meditation in general, or other kinds of meditation more and more. And I think it's just, in a lot of ways, the latest California fad. Yeah. Next we have a Gamatsu article. The Bradwell Conspiracy launches for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC this fall. I feel like I've heard of the Bradwell Conspiracy, but then quickly forgot about it amongst all the other news for all the other games, which just never really stops. It really never stops. So it's like a office space in a business. Maybe the business is run by the Illuminati. This trailer's not really giving me a lot of information. It's made by a team of BAFTA award-winning AAA veterans with the likes of Fable, Batman, and Tomb Raider under their collective development belts. So it might have more production chops behind it, but it might not. You kind of never know. Let's see. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Phoenix Labs acquires Bot School Incorporated to further Dauntless crossplay efforts. I'd forgotten about Dauntless. I have no idea who Bot School Incorporated or Phoenix Labs are, though. So that's too inside baseball for me. Gamatsu has the Control launch trailer. It's due out August 27th. So we're about 4 days, I believe, away from the game Control coming out. There feels like there is a very good chance that they come out and say that Control is not in any ways as good as it's been hyped up to be. I would totally believe that. It could also just be a really short experience. That's always a chance too. But remember, I think the developers of Control, the last game they made, was also a very fancy looking game that played terribly and had crazy like time manipulating effects that didn't really work that well, and Control is going to be crazy different styles of effects too. So it might just be a case that the developers of Control are not capable of making a good game first, and are only really capable of making something look interesting. I'm about to die again. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article here. Homeworld 20th Anniversary Special Announcement has been set for PAX West 2019. I'd have to kind of remind myself what Homeworld is. I think it's a space 4X style game. This trailer doesn't mean anything. It is getting published noticeably by Gearbox.
What have we?
So I don't know where I really am. Am I boycotting all Gearbox games forever, or am I just boycotting games that are being published by 2K? I think I'm in a big question mark right now, so I think I am boycotting Gearbox games too, just to be on the safe side, because I cannot in good conscience swear that I know it was just 2K with no influence from Gearbox that put over 100 false DMCA strikes on that YouTuber's channel. cannot do anything to survive this. If I play this again, I'll just heal everything and then do damage again, so I have to do that. And then end the turn. It's not too hard to also avoid Gearbox published and Gearbox made games, particularly if you're already boycotting Borderlands. Gamatsu has an article here for the PS4, Switch, and Xbox One. Eternal Blade 2 launches October 11th. Eternal Blade 2, this is... I can't even really tell what this is. It's like a snake head with a gear ring around it with like human arms. This looks like an MMO style game. Might be something here interesting. The trailer graphics look slightly interesting, but what does the actual game look like? It looks like a zoomed out platformer. I was not expecting that. Well, there might be something to that. Again, I'm definitely not going to get hyped on Eternal Blade 2. I should probably check to see if there's an Eternal Blade 1 before I would go any further with anything.
Not too quickly.
Your rage sustains
Next, we have a game on Steam called Public Enemy Revolution Simulator, which looks like it is a low-effort asset flip game. I would not be upset with a Revolution Simulator game, or a game where you play as a revolutionary. That probably would be a little bit harder to sell in many countries if you're trying to actually make money. But you do something like that and you do Mirror's Edge. You do something like that and you do Jet Set Radio. You have a good gameplay mechanic around it, and none of these videos want to reload, but yeah, just looking at the thumbnails, I can pretty much tell you that there's nothing really here as far as gameplay. This is a free game, English only, which is odd because they're putting some form of Russian style text on the wall, it looks like, so that seems weird, to say the least. Attack here.
our tombs.
And in the turn. Gamatsu has an article here for the PS4. The Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel 3, The Bonds Between Us trailer is now available, so another hype anime trailer from Disgaea. I'm gonna leave this open because I want to see if any of the Legend of Heroes Trails of Cold Steel series have come to PC before. Because I think they have. They may just be a little bit further behind. And yeah, I am just beating my head against the wall today, trying to get victories. Theoretically, it doesn't matter too much if I don't get the victories, because I could do them on Friday, but I don't want to have 3 daily quests on the European account and 3 daily quests on the Asian account on a Friday.
Versus Anduin.
The light shall bring
It did occur to me,
Light
instead of starting really
smiles
late
upon the
today,
just.
to stream actually rather early at like 10 in the morning when I was just about to go to sleep. I just didn't feel like I had enough energy in me to accomplish that and do 3 hours of streaming. TechRaptor has a story. I heard about this and didn't know the whole details. Square Enix has apparently canceled a game tournament, I believe in Japan, after death threats to the staff. There's been a slightly increased amount of death threats being put out in Japan, or Japanese people have started just claiming they're getting death threats and taking them seriously, particularly after the Kyoto animation arson attack, which, by the way, they were able to recover like 75 pencil sketches, which is not a lot, and put them on display from that arson attack. But they were also able to recover all the digital stuff, which would have been a lot more in drawings. I believe, yeah, the story here is that another man was arrested for threatening to kill staff because he spent over $2,000 trying to unlock a specific item in a gacha game. So it's microtransaction rage in some cases, and just bad business practices, which I would imagine Japan is really, really bad about treating its staff and its consumers well. America's not much better either, though. So yeah. The show must go on attitude probably needs to be adapted a little bit more for some of these events. If you're spending money, if you're renting places, if you're going to have an event, you can't cancel it just because random people online are making threats. That's a matter for the police to actually either protect you or arrest that person. But if you give the power to random people where they can swat people or where they can make threats, no event eventually will ever happen, ever. And living in fear is no way to live your life. Gematsu has an article for the Switch. Waku Waku Sweets Physical Edition launches this winter in North America. Never heard of this game, but it looks more child focused if I was to guess. Seems like it's a pastry style game. Yeah, like maid cafe type experience. Now, I could be totally wrong here, and it could actually not be child friendly, but looking at this trailer, it seems like it's a cooking simulator for the Switch, which this is the part where Cooking Mama kind of confused me too, is how are the motions going to work. 100 recipes. Yep, it seems like they're keeping everything kid friendly. They're also going to a slightly older late 90s, early 2000s, even mid 2000s art style, which is a little bit off of what you would normally see as far as animation styles from Japanese games and Japanese animators. If this guy's not playing, that's great, because that means we're in a good position to actually maybe win.
I got this.
TechRaptor has an article. Pokemon Sword and Shield new battle mechanics are shown at Pokemon Worlds. So there's a video here. Battle mechanics and what the game's gonna look like. And there's the gigantic evolutions, or the Dyna evolutions, or whatever they're called. Pokemon Shield and Sword is coming out November 15th for the Switch, in case anybody hasn't heard that. This and this. Attack.
I got this.
Attack. Pokemon doesn't really need more hype, but I'll give it to it anyways, since it kind of deserves it, being such a popular series. Gematsu has an article for the Switch. Flowers Les Quartet Saisons is coming to the Switch November 28th. Flowers, the 4 seasons, I think is what that translates from French. This looks like a more soft pencil sketch style visual novel. Yep, so another visual novel coming to the Switch. Not super surprising there.
Your rage sustains.
And there we go. Win. Was that the one win I needed, or do I need another one? I need another one. I have about 12 more things to talk about, so if once we finish the news, that'll just be the end of this stream, and then I could be potentially halfway through this daily quest for Friday. Gamatsu has an article, Damascus Gear Operation Osaka is coming to the Switch August 29th in Japan. This looks like it's a mech battler game. Now the screenshot might be very deceptive because this is the menu, so I kind of want to see what the gameplay looks like, and they don't have any trailer. There is a Steam page though, so we could get an idea from that. It's mostly positive. Jump through this stuff. Yeah, it seems like it's kind of a top-down, fast-paced mech battler game. I'm willing to consider that. $19.99 HD edition, full Japanese audio. It's rated mostly positive. This is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, though. I certainly don't find good mecha games very often, let alone play mecha games much at all. I'll put it on the wish list, though. I'm gonna be generous. Of course, one of these days my generosity is gonna end in me having to do a wish list cleanup video, but that's fine. That's gonna happen regardless. So yeah. And there's a reason now to think about playing that game since it's coming to the Switch, and give it a second consideration, which almost certainly there's probably 1,000 games on Steam that I've overlooked that if they are actually good and they actually bother to come to the Switch or some other platform, could bring my attention back to them. But I'm hardly trying to have a complete collection of video game experiences also, so if I miss a few, I miss a few. It doesn't really matter. Speaking of games to miss, though, here's a game on Steam called They Will Find You. The dark screenshot syndrome by far. Just terrible graphics, top-down, asset flip tiles. It just looks terrible in every single shot. $2.99 discounted, English only. This is a game definitely not making it to the fall list. Alright.
I must consider.
Let's play this.
Let the pain speak to
And
me.
then this.
Someone injured?
This. And we'll do that. So last stream we had a game called, I think it was Championship Drone Racing or something. It was an actual, like, based off some drone racing championship game, and it was like the first good-looking drone racing game I've ever seen. But I think it required VR, or it suggested VR, which was weird. Now we have Unreal Drone Racing, which is just a low-effort asset flip drone racing game in comparison, and this is what we've mostly seen. It's also been a really long time since I've seen anything that has the powered by the Unreal Engine logo in front of it, which is to say most things are either not getting made by the Unreal Engine or they are not getting released under the free license or the license of Unreal, where they have to put the logo at the beginning of the game. That might be, it might be the case that you never have to put the logo at the beginning of an Unreal game anymore, and they're just trying to use that as a selling point. but it's not a very great selling point, and the quality of the screenshots and the way the game looks otherwise is still terrible. This game is $7.99 discounted, English only, and yeah, it's definitely not a drone racing game to replace or supplant the other drone racing games we saw. Let's see. I'm just gonna do this, and then I'm gonna hit this, and hit this, and then hit that. Gamatsu has an article. Single-player card game Cardpocalypse has been announced for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, PC, and Apple Arcade. This looks like this might be an interesting game. Kind of a I don't know if you would want to call it Simpsons or South Park style mentality. It looks like in the art style in the game.
I wonder.
Game themes. There might be something here, there might not. The problem with a card game like this is either it's going to be a quick one playthrough for a single player experience, or it's going to fail as an attempted competitor to a lot of other card games out there, including Hearthstone.
Not too quickly.
That, and hit that. Put in another turn. So yeah, when this comes out, I'll keep an eye out for it. But there's definitely a lot of card games out there already, and this could just fall into the mess of so many other card games that already exist. Next we have a Gamatsu article, and I want to mention that yes, I am realizing that a significant amount of articles are coming out from Gamatsu. I think I like that. I think I'm sticking with that. We are still following TechRaptor, we are still following Game of Sutra, but that's pretty much the only three video game journal sites that I'm even bothering to follow at this point, and I'm not even really in the market to try and find another one that doesn't drive me crazy with a bunch of political editorializations. Alright, now I'm in a weird position because I have a little bit more news and we have nothing to do on the Asian account, so I'm going to switch back to the European account and we'll work on getting that part done. And while we're doing that, we have a Gamatsu article here for the PC, PS4, smartphone, Switch, and Xbox One. I guess that's everything until you throw in Stadia or some other service.
Come tell us a story.
A mystery adventure game, Hitchhiker, has been announced for all of those things, including Apple Arcade. I guess they need to throw in Apple Arcade too. Excuse me, I'm wearing out my voice. Here we have the trailer and we can look at this. It feels like there's been several games, and this is kind of asset flippy, low polygon. There have been several games where you've ridden down a road, but now we're seeing something that looks like completely different, something medieval. So I have no idea what Hitchhiker is, but we'll see it. Alright, now this is going to be really weird because I need the warrior, and because the warrior is pretty much the only thing that would equip weapons short of the rogue's special ability, and I have to play 6 weapons. I don't think that's really going to happen. Revolution Software put out a trailer for Beyond the Steel Sky, the sequel to like the 20-year-old point-and-click adventure Beneath the Steel Sky. This is a new trailer if you're interested in it. It doesn't seem like this trailer is showing much more than previous trailers. It's coming to PC, consoles, and Apple Arcade. Now, let's re-roll all of these and see if we can get a weapon. I don't even know if there are any weapons in this deck. Gamatsu has an article, the Pokemon Sword and Shield Gamescom Gala Region Town Tour video message. So if you want to watch them give a little bit of a town tour, you could look at that. You're really spoiling yourself for the game though. It's just play the game. That's really all it takes. Let's play this and see if that counts as equipping a weapon or not. And so that would put us at a count of 1 question mark. Gamatsu has an article, Final Fantasy VIII Remastered, 8 minutes of gameplay. A lot of this is from just Gamescom stuff. So this is the 8 remaster, not the 7 remaster. I think 8 actually is closer to being out than the 7 remaster. So the whole thing is kind of weird. And confusion abound. Yeah, Final Fantasy VIII Remastered is September 3rd for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. I'm fairly certain that the characters and story from 8 have nothing to do with 7, so it's not a major issue, but it still is weird to say the least. To have 2 releases and them being backwards, chronologically speaking.
What shall we hunt?
Next we have a Gamatsu article for the PS4, Switch, and Xbox One. Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire Ultimate Edition has been announced. Definitely heard of people liking Pillars of Eternity, but I couldn't really tell you what it is. I'm so overwhelmed as far as games. This is just E3 all over again, and that trailer showed absolutely nothing there. They really should get rid of E3 for many reasons, but probably get rid of PAX and Gamescom also, and just have a much more spread out announcements of games. If every week there was a new major game announced and a new major game came out, that would be fine. Particularly if it was just counter-programmed, so that if a new sports game came out, say Madden came out that week, then you put something that's highly nerd-focused that sports people wouldn't really be interested in as an announcement. Let's see. Gamatsu has an update on the previous article. Monster Ranch port is slated for Switch, iOS, and Android. Let's see what the update is. This is what Monster Rancher looks like, by the way. That's pretty awful. Update, it will cost 1,760 yen, which is about $20. Generate monsters. You search for CD names from a custom database through the network. You can also download and battle the monsters raised by breeders all over Japan. The Switch version also supports 2-player battles with 1 Joy-Con per player. So, I mentioned previously, Monster Rancher created the monsters by putting a CD into the PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2. You can't really do that with the Switch, so instead you're just going to search the names of albums of CDs you like. I guess that kind of works via a database. Although maybe it doesn't really work, because then when they have to have the license to all of those CDs, names, and titles, maybe not. Maybe that's not a copyright issue if you just have the title in Japan. So maybe you end up searching that database and finding it's a bunch of made-up CD names, and none of them have any relevancy. And very quickly you would see people online saying, type this, and type this to get the best monsters. Next we have an article from Komatsu, Gungrave Gore D23 screenshot. It's a screenshot of a gun from the Gungrave PS4 game that's coming out, which I imagine is somewhat related to the Gungrave anime, maybe manga. So I should have played now, I believe, 2 weapons out of 6. If it counted right. Next we have an article on Komatsu for the PS4, PC, Switch, and Xbox One. Contra Rogue Corps digital pre-order and season pass have been announced. There was this female character that caught my eye as a Contra Rogue Corps, and this character catches my eye too, certainly. So it feels like this is the story here, is this is a Contra game with different heroes than what you would see in a regular Contra game. But looking at this gameplay, it seems like this is more of a top-down twin-stick shooter with different kinds of enemies that I've never really seen before in a Contra game. I don't recognize that, and a bunch of just random heroes. So it feels like they're using the Contra name Konami is, and this sounds like something Konami would do, definitely, is that they're just using the title of Contra to sell something that is a completely new and different game.
Unity, precision,
And I don't know if I really want to support Konami, but yeah, it looks like it might be a slightly interesting game if there's a single player experience for me. Otherwise, I'm not interested in it. It looks like it's mostly focused on multiplayer experience though. Gamatsu has an article, One Punch Man, a hero nobody knows, adds terrible tornado, Silver Fang, and Atomic Samurai, so 3 new characters were confirmed as far as heroes to play. One thing I will applaud One Punch Man for doing versus, say, the Amazon series The Boys, which might be based off a comic book. The Boys basically just copied the Justice League down to every little detail, whereas One Punch Man specifically spent a lot of efforts to think of weird, different superheroes. And the only superhero in One Punch Man that even looks somewhat similar is the main character, Saitama. Kind of looks like a Superman, but he can't fly or see through things or have X-ray vision. All he can do is punch really hard. So honestly, he's closer to he's closer to a much lesser known superhero that can just punch really hard. The one with Jessica Jones, what was his name? Not Daredevil for sure, not Jessica Jones, not the Punisher. I want to say Black Dynamite is I think who I'm referencing, because Black Dynamite, I believe, if the name is right, had like basically impenetrable skin and was really strong, and that's pretty much all Saitama from One Punch Man can do. And the color palette is actually a little bit similar. I'm about to die, but if we could play one more weapon, that would be great.
Let the pain speak to me.
There we go. We'll draw cards and see if we can get a weapon. Nope. Moving on, Gamatsu has an article, Code Vein PS4 and Xbox One demos launch September 3rd. The full game is due out September 27th. Code Vein is losing some of its hype, I would say, as the spiritual successor to Dark Souls, and I think the actual successor as far as talent to Dark Souls, because it is more of an anime vampire game than I think anybody in the West really is willing to accept. It needs to get a little bit more hype coming out around it as it's approaching its launch date. Again, it's a weird example. So that was just one weapon. So if we were to play the rogue here and use the rogue's ability, would we get a weapon that way, or is that not count? I bet it doesn't count. So yeah, Code Vein needs to probably get more hype around this release, and probably will get a little bit, but if you stop the hype train in the middle of building up all that momentum, you're doing yourself a disservice, in my opinion. I'm just gonna retrade all these just in case there actually is a weapon in the rogue deck. Almost certainly there isn't. Moving on as we're trying to finish these articles. Gamatsu has Dragon Ball Z Kakarot Gamescom 2019 trailer screenshots. By the way, even the Gamatsu person who runs their Twitter account said, actually I overslept and that's why I put out all of the tweets in a row. So the reason why I'm covering so many Gamatsu articles is also in part around that idea that he put out a lot of tweets to news stories. But yeah, we're almost done. Gamatsu has an article, One Piece Pirates Warriors 4 Gamescom trailer and screenshots. I would put One Piece as a fighting game at the very bottom, because unlike One Punch Man, One Piece has been going on so long that it has way too many characters, and the animation style is too weird. This looks like this is a Warriors beat 'em up game anyways, and I guess that would potentially work better for One Piece and Monkey D. Luffy anyways. So actually, as a Warriors game, I'm much more sold on this idea than I would be if it was a fighting game singly. I still would probably feel a little awkward playing a One Piece game, but I'd give it a chance. If it came to PC, which I guess it is. So I guess it deserves at least a thought. I played out of order again.
Well played.
That was not a well played by any means. Let's see. Gamatsu has an article. Marvel Avengers A Day Prologue Gameplay Walkthrough. Nobody really talked about this gameplay walkthrough, so I'm assuming that the graphics still look disappointing and uninteresting. I don't know if I'm playing the God of Thunder Thor. Do I want to have to spin up my hammer to throw it? Do I have to punch and kick a character multiple times? Do I have to hold down quick and time events to lift the thing? Like the entire gameplay immediately feels slow and limited. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's really a game here that people want to play, and it probably needs a lot more work than it's been given. I needed to use my hero ability every turn here, and I'm not. This will be the last game, almost certainly. Komatsu has an article, Trials Rising Crash and Sunburn expansion launches September 10th for the Trials Rising fans out there. Let's see. Lackeys. Attack.
Here we go.
Attack. On the turn. Komatsu has an article for the PC. Knights of Honor 2 Sovereign has been announced. I've never heard of the Knights of Iron series. It's coming from THQ Nordic. Let's see if this trailer actually gives us any indication on what it really looks like to play it. There you have a really fancy trailer, which THQ Nordic obviously thinks they can afford. But yeah, no gameplay image whatsoever in that. Hit this. And
Well played.
this.
Here we go.
And hit that.
Well
Another
played.
turn. Let's go ahead and squelch this guy because he's getting annoying. Game of Sutra has an article. PUBG is rolling out console crossplay to the Xbox One and PS4 this year, which I'm surprised, and I guess I'll probably believe it when I see it. I'm surprised that the PS4 console crossplay is a thing that's anywhere close to actually happening. But yeah, just because PUBG can do it doesn't mean that Sony will let everybody do it. That's pretty much the attitude they've been taking. We have a game on Steam here called S-Lander, which looks like it's a kind of FTL clone. Interesting. It feels like this is a straight up FTL clone. I don't know. I'll put it on follow. Like, I liked FTL. I did not win at FTL very often, so an easier FTL might be interesting instead of trying to go back and playing the same game over and over again, particularly since I've seen almost all the content that exists there. This is $8.99. It requires a third-party EULA, English full audio. I'll put it on the follow list. We'll see if people buy it and give it a review. I wouldn't be surprised, being an FTL looking clone, if the graphics are not... Well, the graphics look fine, but wouldn't be surprised if the game itself is not very polished. Let's see.
This is our town, scrub.
Needed to use my
Here
hero
we
ability
go.
every
Not a
turn.
valid target.
That's what I want to do. Gematsu has an article for the PS4 and Switch. Moto New Puzz Ostomatsu-san Shippin Soto Sugyo Kikaku has been announced for the PS4 and Switch, due out December 5th in Japan. As a long Japanese name, by far. It looks like it's kind of a Candy Crush style game. I wouldn't be surprised if this was completely reskinned and sold as a completely different game in the West. That's definitely not a name I recognize.
Let me think.
And TechRaptor has an article. Devil May Cry is amongst the newest additions to the Xbox Game Pass. Devil May Cry 5, that is. If you're interested in that bit of information. That brings me to the Humble Bundle. So, let's see. What bundles do we have? Any new game bundles? Nope, no new game bundles at all. Close that, close that, close that. and close that. There's 4 different tabs open around just the installing the Great Suspender again. Let's see. Now I'm on my Twitter feed.
This guy's toast. You're looking at me.
This.
Here we go.
You're looking at me.
That's my turn.
Let's move quickly.
So we've got some more Gamatsu articles coming out, and some more games that came out on Steam. I'm just going to scroll down my Twitter and see if any of it's that important, as we're still trying to get this all done.
Look out there.
Up to no good.
There we go. How many weapons did I use there? None. None whatsoever. So, yeah, it would be easier for me to just make a deck full of weapons than it would be to try to play any existing deck that barely has any weapons to get that daily quest done. But as I said much earlier, I was just probably going to re-roll that anyways because it's not worth it. TechRaptor has an article from 3 hours ago. Oddworld Soulstorm is an Epic Game exclusive. Devs preemptively addressed the backlash. There are also came out, the developer of the game Dark came out to say specifically that they were offered to be an Epic Games exclusive and turned it down because of backlashes. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much it. So there's a few things we'll talk about on Friday, not really anything that needs to be talked about right now. So that's going to be it for this stream. We didn't go too late, considering I started late. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below in the description box. And if you want to support me even further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and gift me a game on my wish list. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.